Welcome everybody to session 28 of my Pillars of Eternity Lorethrough. Um, Last session we went to the Temple of Woodica in Defiance Bay, and that's where we ended, right outside there. But now I am in Gilded Vale in a random house. The reason for that is because I finally decided to look up where to get the Dyrwood History Part 3 book, because it's been something that has eluded us thus far, and we have access to the entire history from 1 to 6, except for part 3. And I looked it up and realized that part 3 was here in this random house in Gilded Vale, the War of Black Trees and the Rise of Admeth Hadret. So I may or may not have come into this house before and just didn't pick this book up because it was stealing. So now I think would be a great time to read through these books. We have already read through the first two. So I just want to load those up real quick. Just part 1, or part 2, I mean. Wonder if I actually... So here's part 1. Just taking a quick look to remind ourselves what actually happened here. So this is just talking about how the Dyrwood came to be. The Fairkening in the Edir Empire sent colonists, sent settlers over here and set up colonies because they found that there were Engwithan ruins around with some riches in them. So he wanted to exploit the land and the ruins in this area that is now called the Dyrwood. So it says here, Dyrford remained the center for the Imperial Guard, but the settlement in Pearlwood Gulf, New Dunrid, was the true seat of power for the area. And New Dunrid is what would eventually become Defiance Bay. And then in part 2, the Broken Stone War, this talks about the first major conflict between the Adiran settlers and the Glenfathan natives, where one of the Adiran settlers, a farmer, accidentally knocked down a Adra pillar that was important to the Glenfathans, and that started a conflict. And then Adrang Hadret, who was the ruler in Dyrwood at the time, told the Glenfathans that they would stop exploring the ruins. And he also tried to outlaw slavery, but this angered the Adiran Empire. So at this point, the colonists were considered a palatinate of the Adiran Empire. So they had their own governor, their own rulers in the Dyrwood, but they were still under the rule of the empire. So that was parts 1 and 2, and now we have part 3 in this chest right here. So this is the War of the Black Trees and the Rise of Admeth Hadret. After the Broken Stone War, the Dyrwood would see peace and prosperity for 21 years. Aside from the occasional slave uprising or border dispute, nothing of any note happened until 2652 AI. Some of the Dyrwoodan earls, tired of being restricted by the treaties and encouraged by imperial sources, defied the decrees and actively sent people to loot the ruins of the Dyrwood. Response from the Glenfathans was not immediate, but when it came, it was brutal and bloody. There was a slave uprising, and Regid resumed control of his guerrilla fighters. A contingent of the Lemgen joined the forces as well, making the fights in the forest even more deadly for the Dyrwoodan soldiers. So here, we have a new uprising, we have a new conflict that's brought about from people getting tired of not exploiting the ruins, and the Glenfathan natives, under the rule of Regid, eventually attacking them. So it seems like they heard about this, and rather than react right away, they actually amassed their forces, made a plan, and attacked with purpose rather than just randomly. Adrang, then far too old to lead Dyrwood in a war, sent his son Admeth to deal with the situation. Admeth, showing the same tactical prowess as his father, set fire to the forest at the Ishe-Uar River then blocks the forces retreating from the Inferno. Some of the Glenfathans escape, but thousands would die in the blaze. Regid is captured and sent to a holding in New Hamar. This goes on for several months, and Admeth uses the same tactic many times to flush Glenfathans and Delemgan from the battlefield. The entire war lasts less than a year. The Dyrwood eventually wins, but at a terrible price. This conflict would become to be known as the War of Black Trees, because the ruler, Admeth Hadret, literally set fire to forests to drive out the Glenfathans, and when they tried to escape, they would trap them in there, so a lot of them would be burned alive in these forests. Pretty brutal stuff. Tragedy struck the Dyrwood in 2654 when a Drang, whose health had been waning, succumbed and passed into the cycle. Regid, who had developed a begrudging respect for his constant adversary over the years they had fought, sent Admeth his sincere condolences from captivity in New Hamar. Admeth assumed his father's place as grave over the Dyrwood. The other earls disliked this development and began publicly rebuking Admeth's decrees. In 2655 AI, Admeth, tired of the problems caused by the recalcitrant earls, but having support of the new Valian dukes and common folk of the Dyrwood, having saved them from the Glenfathans, delivers an ultimatum to the Firkanning of Edair. He demands to be made Grave Palatine. This move would give him authority and power over all the earls, their holdings, and their titles. Dyrwood would become a palatinate instead of a gravedom. A graverum. The Firkanning, who did not want to have to deal with a rebellion while trying to establish a hold on the Vorlith trade network in Red Saris, begrudgingly agreed to Admeth's demands. Admeth would use this new power to bring all the earls in line. As a trade-off for being given the power, Admeth put money and resources into all of the Dyrwood's ports to increase shipping traffic. In turn, this increased the Firkanning's income. So I said it was a palatinate before. I guess at this point it wasn't actually a palatinate, but Admeth Hadret forced the Firkanning there to make it a palatine, a palatinate. And now Admeth was the kind of local governor, the local ruler, where the Firkanning was still the ruler by name. Moving on, under Admeth's rule, the Dyrwood saw 7 productive and profitable years. In 2662 AI, he did what had been tried for many years without success, bringing slavery to an end in the Dyrwood. He negotiated the 10 Years Treaties, so-called because it has been 10 years since the War of the Black Trees. A timeline was established in which the slaves would be released. The owners would be compensated with money or land for each slave released. If they did not comply, the slaves would be taken and a fine would be levied against the owner. In return, the Glenfathans would open trade with the Dyrwood and cede some of their territories to the Dyrwoodan government in practice, meaning they would stop contesting the presence of those who lived and ruled there. Hundreds of Coopers attempted to rebel against this. Admeth, expecting such a reaction, reacted accordingly, and the rebellion was quickly crushed. His agents then spread propaganda through the populace, making the Coopers' rebellion and its instigators seem far worse than they truly were. This tactic worked, and there would be no more trouble. So this is actually another conflict, the Coopers' rebellion here, that was quelled very quickly, but it seems like Admeth tried to make it seem worse than it was, and it seemed like that was enough to stop people from keeping rebelling. Interesting there. So we have the War of the Black Trees here. And because of the War of the Black Trees and because of his tactics there, Admeth gained power to the dismay of a lot of the local rulers in the Dyrwood, but he was able to make the Firkanning name him the Grave Palatine, meaning he was the local ruler over all these people. And because of his rules, he negotiated the 10 Years Treaties, in which slaves would be released, and the Glenfathans would cede some of the land to the Dyrwoodan government. So it seemed like there was a kind of peace that resulted because of this. Obviously not a long-lasting peace, but it was a slight peace that came because of this. So that's part 3, the War of the Black Trees and the Coopers' Rebellion. Let's move on to part 4. I think I have this. It might be. Oh, here's part 5. All right, part 4, Hadret's Rebellion. The rural communities loved Admeth Hadret, considering him the best leader they'd ever had. In Edir, the Ferkening rankled against his usurpations of imperial authority, but no longer had the necessary power to truly undo anything that had happened. In other words, he was kind of angering the Ferkening over in Edir, but because he was across the sea, there wasn't really much he could do. 2 years later, in 2664 AI, the Ferkening found allies willing to explore the ruins against the treaty conditions and plundered them for their artifacts. This was done discreetly at first, but they eventually became careless. The agents were discovered and arrested, but there was no evidence pointing back to the Ferkening. Admeth, suspecting the truth, used Glanfath and Brishelgwyn, mind hunters, or ciphers as we call them, the progenitors of modern-day ciphers, to investigate the matter further. With this method of interrogation, he discovered a chain of evidence all the way back to the Ferkening. While he investigated, many rural communities suffered retaliatory attacks by Glanfathans. In other words, the Ferkening ordered the plundering of the ruins, even though it was in the treaty that the Dyrwoodans would not do that. He did this secretly, but they became careless. So Admeth figured it out using mind hunters. But the people who paid the price here were some of the rural communities that the Glanfathans were attacking. So because of the actions of the Ferkening in the Edir Empire, local communities suffered because of that. And they were not local Glanfathans, it was local communities of Dyrwoodans, who supposedly were subjects of the Edir Empire at this point. Armed with this new information, Admeth worked with Galvin Medra, the new leader of the Glanfathans, and the rural communities of the Dyrwood to prevent the Ferkening's agents from entering the ruins. There was a back and forth between the two groups, both sides engaging in various political, economic, and military maneuvers to try and gain the upper hand. The Ferkening was at a disadvantage in this game, though, as he preferred to assert his authority without causing an uprising. Eventually, Admeth had enough. He convinced 7 of the 9 earls to join him, and they severed their allegiance to the Ferkening, declaring themselves independent and decree they would govern themselves, just as the Valian publics did 20 years prior. Admeth told the people he had tired of policies that made the nobles rich while putting the people of the Dyrwood at risk. He declared himself a duke, again modeled after the Valian Republic's governing structure, and called the Dyrwood a free palatinate. Thus began the War of Defiance in 2668 AI. The war lasted 4 years and caused countless casualties, including Admeth himself. The Dyrwoodans, with their Glanfathan allies, were able to persevere. Glanfathan astrologers, alongside the Dyrwoodan forces and members of the ad hoc Knights of the Crucible militia, won the Battle of Defiance Bay, which became the last battle of the war and left Dyrwood free from Adirian imperial rule. 7 of the 9 earls of the Dyrwood survived and, unified in purpose, signed treaties with the Ferkening of Edir. The war gave the Dyrwood a greater sense of unity between its citizens and their Glanfathan allies. Admeth Hadret was revered by both groups, and the Dyrwood enjoyed for the first time a nationwide fellowship of independence, perseverance, and sacrifice. Yenwood in Quinsrune were dissolved and incorporated into the surrounding earldoms, leaving 7: Hellsgate, The Grasp, Tenforth, Norwich, Coldwater, Ashfall, and Balereach. New Dunbridge was renamed Defiance Bay and would become the seat of power for the new Duke in Balereach. The new Duke's rule would begin in 2672 AI. So that was part 4, right? Yeah, that was Hadret's rebellion here, where the Dyrwood gained independence from the Edir Empire across the sea. Admeth Hadret died doing this, but he's kind of been lionized as a hero for rising up and causing this to actually happen. The Dyrwood Part 5, The Proliferation of Animancy. I wonder if we should read, because we just read about Admeth Hadret's rebellion, let's instead read, it looks like, we only have part 2, so part 1 must have been in the Hall of Revealed Mysteries. So we'll have to go there to read it. We'll continue reading about the Dyrwood right now, and then we'll move over to Admeth Hadret's rebellion. So here's the Dyrwood Part 5, The Proliferation of Animancy. Animancy, outlawed while under Edir rule, was technically no longer taboo after Hadrit's rebellion. Academics began its study again in earnest in 2681 AI. By 2697 AI, there were almost 40 academics actively researching the field both in the Dyrwood and the Vailian republics, even though no significant results had been discovered. A tragic breakthrough of sorts happened in 2704 AI. An animancer working in Balereach accidentally shattered the souls of about a dozen volunteers who had been helping him. In retaliation for the death, the citizen of the area stormed his house and killed him. The Earl of the region, not wanting to waste resources or anger the locals any more than they already were, did nothing to find the head of the vigilante mob, but neither did he outlaw animancy. To ensure their own safety, most animancers moved from the rural areas where they were studying and settled in Defiance Bay, many of them choosing the emerging and wealthy district of Brackenbury as the new home of their operations. While there were still a few breakthroughs and the study of animancy continued for the next 24 years, it quickly slowed as it became cost prohibitive and complicated the more people. It quickly slowed as it became cost prohibitive and complicated the more people learned about it. Most animancers couldn't afford to continue research without the support of donations or gifts from wealthy individuals and organizations. In 2737 AI, some animancers, desperate to continue their studies and seeing no other means of furthering their research, entered the forbidden ruins of Erglonfath to further their research. They discovered some such sites had strange artifacts that seemed to bear affinity to soul essence, and began to prod at the devices for further insight. Even with continued research, they are unable to tell quite what they have discovered. Eventually, they were found out by the Glenfathans, who captured some of them, demanding they be punished for their crimes. The Dyrwoodan authorities, in order to maintain their treaties and keep the peace, had no choice. They allowed the animancers to be executed according to Glenfathan tradition. This led the Duke to make an additional proclamation: the study and practice of animancy on or even near the sacred Glenfathan sites would be punishable by death. In 2780, in order to solidify relations again with the Glenfathans, the Dyrwoodan government allowed some animancers to begin training and experiments in conjunction with the Glenfathan mine hunters, their native ciphers. This was an exchange of information. The animancers documented the secrets of the mine hunters' powers. The mine hunters learned new techniques for concentration, which assisted them in taking their powers to a level no Glenfathan had seen before. The ciphers, no longer wary of animancers' intentions, trusted them to such a level that they convinced the Glenfathans to give some animancers limited access to some of the training sites where the Glenfathans practiced. The Anamfaths of the Glenfathan tribes opened the training grounds to the animancers. They were not allowed inside, as this was still strictly forbidden, but the general allowances by the Glenfathans were seen as a breakthrough in relations between the Dyrwood and Erglonfath. Over the next 8 years, the animancers' research would continue unimpeded. With the exception of some minor squabbles, there had been no major strife between the groups for almost 120 years since. So it seems like a lot of the conflicts between Erglonfath, and Dyrwood is always based on these ruins. In this case, it was the animancers who went in there secretly to try and study animancy because they were closer to Adra and copper, which is very important for soul research. But when the Glenfathans found out about it, they got mad, and the Dyrwoodan government actually allowed them to execute the animancers that did that. But because of that, animancy kind of suffered a blow. Eventually, though, the Glenfathans and the Dyrwoodan animancers seem to work together, not to plunder the ruins, but to actually make some strives forward in animancy. All right, we have one more to read. Part 6. It turns out I don't have Admath Hadra Part 1, by the way, so we'll have to look at that some other time. Part 6, The Saints' War and Widewind's Legacy. This brings us up to current, I believe. In 2807 AI, war returns to the Dyrwood. So this was a long time without conflict in a land that at one point was just rife with conflict. But this piece of 120 years is at an end here. Saint Widwin, transformed supposedly into the living incarnation of Aethys, marched on the Dyrwood from Rhaed Saris, beginning the Saints' War. The Dyrwood rallied at Halget Citadel and took the battle to him in Rhaed Saris, attempting to prevent as much damage to their own land as they could. Even though there were devastating losses for the Dyrwoodan forces, using Hadrit's military techniques combined with Galvin Reg's strategies, they were able to secure a few victories for themselves as well. So interestingly here, Admeth Hadrit's strategies and Galvin Reg's strategies, I hope you can't hear the lawnmower outside, I apologize if you can, which is both Dyrwoodan and Glanfathan strategies here. So they are using strategies from both the Dyrwoodans and the native Glanfathans. So it seems like that piece actually resulted in planning together as well. Rhaed Sarin forces made their way into the Dyrwood through the White March, unopposed by the locals at Coldmorn, leaving Mercy Vale burned and devastated. The contempt the Dyrwoods have for Coldmorn for his betrayal lasts well after the war ends. Desperate to end the war and to eliminate St. Widwin, the Magronic clergy. I want to read this last part again. Rhaed Sarin forces made their way into the Dyrwood through White March, unopposed by the locals at Coldmorn, leaving Mercy Vale burned and devastated. The contempt the Dyrwoodans have for Coldmorn for this betrayal lasts well after the war. Oh, okay. So the war didn't actually end in this book yet. It's just saying that the Dyrwoodans held it against the people of Coldmorn even after the war was over. Okay, got it. Desperate to end the war and eliminate St. Widwin, the Magronic clergy of Dyrwood developed a special bomb that was hidden beneath the bridge at Halget Citadel, intending to lure Widwin to the bridge and then detonate it. Their ploy succeeded, and St. Widwin was completely destroyed, along with most of the forces with him and the entire bridge. The 12 Dyrwoodan men and women who volunteered to lay St. Widwin on the bridge were also lost, their sacrifice and martyrdom celebrated by the Dyrwood in ensuing years. The bomb would come to be known as the God Hammer, and soon after the battle, the citadel was renamed Godhammer Citadel. St. Widwin's forces were easily routed after his death, and the Dyrwood set about rebuilding from the first major conflict in over a century. In retaliation for St. Widwin's action on Aethys' part, many Aethasian followers were purged from Dyrwoodan communities or driven out via social pressure. Less than a year after the devastation of the Saints' War, tragedy hit again. In 2809 AI, the first Hollowborn was reported in the Dyrwood. Okay, so this is after the Godhammer. I'm sorry, I kind of tuned out while I was reading right there. So this is the Godhammer Citadel, which we have talked about before, because it destroyed St. Widwin and Aethos. And here it says, in retaliation for St. Widwin's action on Aethys' part, many Aethasian followers were purged from Dyrwoodan communities or driven out via social pressure. So this is why there's not many Aethys followers still in the Dyrwood, although they are in Rhaed Saris, which is to the north. Less than a year after the devastation of the Saints' War, tragedy hit again. In 2809 AI, the first Hollowborn was reported in the Dyrwood. Many of these poor creatures died within weeks or months of being born. The outcry from the populace calls for blame or punishment to be leveled against someone, whether it be the gods, the mothers, the government, or the Aethasian followers. Responding to great socio-political pressure to try and help the Hollowborn, animancers developed a process to transplant animal souls into the infants that they might develop survival instincts and even basic personality. The process seemed successful, so it was repeated on tens of thousands of Hollowborn, even though many animancers disagreed with the technique, worried about the ethical implications. These protests were largely ignored and discounted, and the process was soon named Salvation, and the Hollowborn given souls this way were called the Saved. 5 years after the first Hollowborn, an Orlan girl is saved. She entered into puberty. In a matter of mere weeks, she transformed into a ravenous, feral creature devoid of all conscience. Soon, all of the saved would experience the same fate. Each one, upon reaching puberty, would transform into what the locals called wicks, uncontrollable children. After researching the problem, animancers discovered an incompatibility between the animal soul and the children's bodies. This fueled the parents' anger, as many of them had to kill their wicked children. The animancers responsible were widely denounced, and many of them were dragged from their homes, beaten, and in many cases, killed. Most surviving animancers left the rural areas en masse and headed to Defiance Bay. Others left the area completely, moving to the Valian Republics to study in peace. So, after the events of the Saint War, we've actually talked about this quite a bit here. That's when the Hollowborn started happening. And I wanted to take a note of that. In 2809 AI, the first Hollowborn was reported. But here we see more of animancy being blamed for something. At first, animancers were praised as saviors almost. It was called salvation, and the children who were given animal souls were called saved because it seemed to work. However, later, when those souls appeared to be incompatible, and when the children entered puberty and became wicks and uncontrollable, ravenous, feral creatures, all of a sudden, people were blaming animancers for this, and they started to kill animancers. So animancers didn't feel safe anymore. So here they are first lionized as saviors because they supposedly saved these Hollowborn children. When that turns around, all of a sudden people just need to take their anger out on these people, and that results in the death of animancers. So animancy is very fraught at this point, and the people recognize it as possibly a way to save souls, but they take their anger out on it when it doesn't go right. This is very human, the way people act here, unfortunately, where something happens and nobody wants to realize that it's their own fault, so they take it out on a particular people that they think are responsible for this, when it's so much more complicated than this. Animancers were here trying to help, but they did not. The results of their experiments turned out to be pretty bad, even though they couldn't really have known that from beforehand from what they were doing. And because it initially had good results, they just kind of kept doing it. And the blame then was put onto the animancers, tragically. So again, when we're looking at animancy, we see its potential for good, and its potential to be helpful, its potential to save, but its other potential to be kind of horrific and tragic at the same time. So I've been talking about how animancy, I think itself is neutral, but it has such a potential to also be corrupted. And it seems here, even when they are trying to do good, then there can be kind of unknown consequences, unforeseen consequences that result in something that is bad. So because of that, animancy is just untrusted. The Valian Republics, they can still study in peace, but it is now illegal. Or I'm sorry, it's not illegal, but it is at least shunned in the Dyrwood, and they moved to Defiance Bay, the animancers, and there is less of them that are doing less work because of what has happened in the past. And that brings us to today. So that was in 2809 that the first Hollowborn appeared, and it is currently 2823. So 2809 was the first Hollowborn. 5 years later, 2814, AI was when the first Wict appeared, and they found out that implanting animal souls was a bad idea. And now this is 9 years later in 2823 AI. So I think what I want to do now is head over to Cadnua. Because the steward got a letter for us. I think it's just for the DLC stuff, but we might as well go grab that because I also want to rest. A wanted criminal.
Looks a little healthier than before.
A wanted criminal by the name of Nairi the Deft Hand has arrived at the stronghold seeking aid in fleeing the Dyrwood. A bad visitor. quickly see what he has to say. Let's see what it looks like now. So the hedge maze is completed. You have this hand sticking up out of the ground here. Ooh. Barathite Cleric. Something you want. I wonder if this is the chapel that is under construction right now, and that's why he's there. Here's Nairi the Deft Hand. Name's Nairi, begging your pardon and all, my lord, but I was hoping we could talk. Very well, let's hear it. You call your allies together and motion for the petitioner to step forward. Nairi the Deft Hand. So, might be I got myself nicked here and there, a few unsavory deeds. My name's on posters all over Defiance Bay now. Makes it harder to walk about freely, if you get me. But my thinking is it's time to seek out new horizons. Deadfire Archipelago seems nice. Then I'm out of everyone's hair. Only, I could use some help getting there. Not that I'm asking you to do this for free, mind. I picked up a couple things from a fellow I know. Not much good to me if I'm caught. I wish I could find out a little bit more about him before I make this decision here. You should turn yourself in. You can't be serious. They'll hang me. I'll see they give you a lenient sentence. It's better than living as an outlaw. Yeah, all right. It's been hard trying to find a burrow to hide in. Might be best to just start over clean. Thanks for giving me an honest chance at it, I guess. A stronghold has gained 1 prestige. So I convinced him to turn himself in. Hopefully I do have some power over a lenient sentence here. Let's talk to the steward.
My lord, you've received a letter, delivered with some urgency as it happens. I thought the messenger might swoon, poor dear. It's from Stalwart. Apparently the mayor, Renengild, has heard of your success here at Cadnua and hopes you can be of aid to her people as well.
Use my lore to say that's a long way for a letter.
People like you come few and far between. And in this case, I believe Renengild is correct in suggesting that your experiences here may give you an edge. It seems she's intent on gaining access to Durgan's battery. And she's offering quite the reward to anyone who can get inside.
Durgan's battery is where they made Durgan steel weapons.
A reward, she says, for getting into the battery. That's a reward of its own, surely.
Durgan's battery, as in the source of Durgan's steel?
Ah, the very same. All manner of people have been trying to infiltrate the keep for years. Our own Earl was much taken with the story of the battery's fall. There are many legends concerning the battery. As the Earl told it, the dwarves fought amongst themselves, each seeking to use the battery to further his or her own ambitions.
The dwarves fought amongst themselves, each seeking to use... Okay.
Greed and cruelty brought down the battery. And now the spirits of those same dwarves roam the halls. Whatever happened, the battery has been impenetrable ever since. A shame. I don't doubt that there are great treasures still within those halls.
Perhaps I'll pay Stalwart a visit.
Oh, just think! The greatest of the dwarven strongholds, ours to explore!
I should mention that among those rumored to have answered Renengild's summons is a certain group I believe you may have an interest in. Followers of Woodica, intent on reaching Stalwart and the battery. I do not know what they seek there, but I thought it worth mentioning, given your interest in the ruins at Defiance Bay.
I wonder if that's the leaden key.
Now that I've delivered Reningild's message, there is also a local matter of some concern, my lord. A mercenary band has been sighted to the northeast. I believe they mean to take Concelhaut's tower, and I don't expect the Archmage will go quietly.
Concelhaut's one of the greatest wizards of our generation.
Aloth fidgets and flutters, vacillating between anxiety and excitement. He appears to be at a loss for words.
The Torn Bannermen are a deadly fighting force, and Concelhaut himself has sent many travelers to their graves. I would caution you to stay clear of the region if you do travel to the White March. It is not that I doubt your courage, my lord, but Concelhaut alone boasts power of a different scale altogether to those foes you have faced thus far. Given more time, perhaps, you will match him. If the Bannermen succeed in their efforts, I fear they may turn their attention to Cadnua. I will keep you apprised of the situation, my lord.
Who is Concelhaut?
A famed archmage. I am given to understand that the Brackenberry Sanitarium puts much stock in his work, as regards the manipulation of the soul. His spells are widely circulated. But he is poorly regarded in many circles. Some call him a madman, or else cruel and barbarous. He must be very old by now. Perhaps that is why the Torn Bannermen believe they can best him.
Do you know anything else about these mercenaries?
Little enough, I'm afraid. The Torn Bannermen are well supplied and well organized, and there are rumors that they are backed by an unknown benefactor.
Okay, so they are trying to kick Concelhaut, a very powerful mage, out of his tower here, and the steward is worried that they'll come for Cadnua afterwards.
They have proved remarkably effective in the past, and they are certainly a threat now.
Farewell.
Safe travels, my lord.
So we got a quest for Durgan's battery to travel to Stalwart and travel to Cragholt and investigate the conflict. Cragholt is where Concelhaut is. See if there's anything else that Marshal Forwin has to say. Okay. Let's go sell some things to my merchants.
Greetings.
Okay. Let's go see what the Crafter's Hall has for sale.
Looks a little healthier than before.
Oh, these are the people that I hired. That's who they are. Tangled wires and broken gears litter these wooden boxes. Nice. The folded shirts feel soft and lightweight. Dried fruit, cured meat, and mixed nuts are sorted among the display case boxes.
Welcome.
Good tidings, my lord. Might I interest you in anything? I offer supplies for the road. I'm sure you'll find many things of use to hardy travelers such as yourself. Let me see what you have. Have some just fine weapons here. That's it. Okay.
The keep's coming along nicely.
I like that they're saying nice things about my keep now. Let's give myself a might bonus. Alright, so since we've done a bunch of reading Let's finish up with a little more here. So, because we read about the history of the Dyrwood, and the last one that we read was about the Saints' War, maybe that was part 5, I don't remember. Oh, actually, we don't have these books. They were still in the Hall of Revealed Mysteries. And it looks like everything that I have here was from the Hall of Revealed Mysteries. Unfortunately. Well, let's head over there. I think it would be a good time to read some of these books. We can learn about gods that we haven't read about yet in Remergond and Skane. I think, too, we'll stop by Anslog's compass.
The keep's coming along nice.
So we can do the quest for the Knights of the Crucible. We can give those notes to them. Still don't feel great about setting up an army of automaton forge knights, but hey, we'll see. Chapel construction completed. What's next? I'm going to create the Warden's Lodge here. Oh, you can get some high-level bounties from the Warden's Lodge as well. Meet Anrode by the dock. This looks like a dock over here. Might be over here, but I think it's over here. Oh, a page from Fulvano's travels that I missed. I met a hopeful Dyrwood woman while in Gilded Vale. She was an invaluable guide during my time in that sorry village and agreed to accompany me in some part of the way towards Anslog's compass. We parted ways in the wilds known as Malcolm's Fork, but I gave her my amulet so that she might remember me fondly. Perhaps I will return to these lands someday after all. I think we found her dead and got the amulets from Fulvano. There's Aaron. You there. Did Commander Cleaver send you? Why can't I talk to him?
Good day, stranger.
There you go. The woman sizes you up, squinting in the darkness. You've come from the Crucible Keep, I take it. I was told you'd have something for me. Tell me what's happening at Fleetbreaker Castle. Her eyes narrow, but she eventually shrugs. You're obviously helping Commander Cleaver, so I suppose I can tell you. The High Justice has been gathering forces there. This mess with the legacy, the unrest, and the man-eating corpses all over the Dyrwood. It isn't going away anytime soon, and the dozens are using this as an opportunity for a power grab. She straightens. We've got to build up strength and defend the Dyrwood as well as our position here, and with these Forge Knights at our disposal, we'll be unstoppable. What's your role in this? I'm the commander stationed at Fleetbreaker Castle. I was sent to retrieve and research by the High Justice himself. She leans closer. And since you know what this research is all about, you can imagine how eager I am to get it back at the castle very quickly and quietly. Give her Piana's research. That's the only option I have, so I guess I have to do that. Excellent. I should get this back to the High Justice before... She looks over your shoulder at the sound of approaching footsteps. Too late. Get ready. Are the dozens coming to get us? Padibald, the man's face is twisted into a snarl. Are you mad? You hold the secrets to one of the foulest examples of animancy, and you want to hand it over to the Crucible Knights? He shakes his head. It's an abomination. Caged souls use as weapons, and you'd give these silk stockings an army of them. He raises his axe, tightens his grip around the haft. I can't let you do this. The research must be destroyed. Not much options here. Different ways of fighting, so raise your weapon. Kill them all, says Padibald. Alright, so we have just some mercenaries.
will remain. Concelhaut.
Parathis!
Man. Why is endurance all the way down here?
You're not getting through me.
Oh, I know why. I'm going to equip his better weapon again.
What?
Anarode wipes her blade and the lining of her cape. I'll take that as our cue to leave. With the Dustons growing so bold, there's no time to waste. She strides backward towards the waiting boat. Give my regards to the commander, and watch her back out there. Return to Crucible Keep. Alright. Oh, got some level ups here. First we'll do Adir. So for Adir, I upped his athletics by 1. I believe he has an athletics of 9 now. And I got Armored Grace. The fighter is perfectly suited to wear even bulky and restrictive suits of armor, lowering the recovery penalty significantly. That should help him out with his defense a little bit, but also keep him attacking. We'll get to Bjartur next. For Bjartur, I upped his lore. He now has a lore of 6. I'm mainly doing that for like conversation and like options and stuff like that. I haven't been using scrolls, as I'm sure you've noticed, so it's not much about that, but I do want to be able to show my knowledge in some of these conversations. I also got some new cipher abilities for him. I have Pain Block, which provides an ally with a mental block on his or her pain, granting a bonus to their damage reduction and regenerating endurance over time. That'd be nice probably to throw on Adair to give him a little bit more deflection. And I also got Silent Scream, produces a psychic howl in the targeted area, stunning the target as well as dealing raw damage to all enemies within. Stands a high chance of causing an interrupt. And finally, I'm going to level up Kana. For Kana, I moved his stealth up 3. I think he has 5 now, maybe 6. And I got Lo, their endless host, the Harbingers of Doom. It generates a field of terror, frightening enemies in the area of effect. Okay, so let's head back to Defiance Bay. I need to go to the Crucible Keep. I'd like to also go to the Hall of Revealed Mysteries to read some of the books there. Let's go to the First Fires first. Hireling Payday. And the Warden's Lodge construction is complete. Next, let's do the Woodland Trails. The Woodland Trails surround the domain of your keep. Upgrading them will grant both the Constitution and the Athletics bonus when resting at Bright Hollow. While I'm running here, I am faintly good. I'm an ally of Defiance Bay. I'm a hero for the Crucible Knights. Oh, I was looking at that. They weren't running. Pauses the game. Yellow. Yeah, defeat the Rogue Forge Knights. Idiots. I knew that something bad was going to happen. And Aloth Endurance can level up. Oh, I moved his mechanics up 2 levels. And I got Minoleta's concussive missiles. Fires 5 missiles of pure force at the target, causing a shockwave of crushing damage to foes close to the impact. And I got Iron Skin. Transmutes the caster's skin into iron, adding significantly to their damage reduction. This effect lasts for up to 10 attacks, so that will be good if anybody does start to attack Aloth. But the other one is just pure damage. And Durance's turn. So Durance moved his mechanics up 1. I think he has mechanics of 6 now. And then we got our level 4, I think level 4 pre-spells. We have Barring Death's Door. Prevents a severely wounded character's health from reaching 0 when it would result in the death of the character. The character can still be knocked out through endurance loss. Devotions for the Faithful. Invokes the benediction of the priest's god, imbuing allies in the area of effect with accuracy and might bonuses, while enemies receive penalties to the same. I like that one. To remember about that one. Prayer Against Bewilderment bestows alacrity upon the minds of allies in the area of effect, granting immunity to the confused and dazed afflictions. Restore Major Endurance shares a generous portion of the caster's divine strength, restoring a significant amount of endurance to all allies in the area of effect. Places Searing Seal places a magical seal on the floor that bursts into flame when an enemy comes into contact with it, blinding them and inflicting burn damage. Shining Beacon conjures an intensely luminous beacon of light, causing enemies in the area of effect to take a penalty to all defenses and accrue burn damage over time. I like that one too. Triumph of the Crusaders imparts to allies the fervor of the righteousness in battle. When an ally in the area of effect delivers a killing blow, he or she regains endurance. And finally, Litany Against Minor Afflictions. Grants a single ally temporary immunity to the blinded, confused, dazed, distracted, frightened, hobbled, prone, sickened, and stuck afflictions. Okay. So I was thinking we were just going to talk to Commander Cleaver and get the next quest from him. Didn't think that something with these Forged Knights would happen so quickly, but it did. So I think we're going to stop here for now. And then that will be the first thing that we do in the next session. We will go and try and stop these rogue Forged Knights who have obviously killed some of the Crucible Knights here. So thank you once again for joining me. I hope you enjoyed our look at the history of Dyrwood and the many, many conflicts over their history. And yeah, I hope you join me for the next one. I believe the next session is session 28. I appreciate any comments, likes, subscribes, all those kinds of things, and we will see you then. Thank you and goodbye.